The year was 2847, and humanity had spread across the stars like seeds carried by cosmic winds. Commander Kate Morrison stood on the frozen surface of Veloria Prime, watching her breath turn to ice crystals in the thin atmosphere. Her team had been searching this dead world for 3 weeks and found nothing but empty ruins and bitter cold. Then everything changed. The ground scanner in Lieutenant Beth Kramer's hands started beeping faster and faster until it became one continuous high-pitched sound. Beth dropped to her knees and brushed away the frost, revealing smooth black stone beneath. Within minutes, the entire crew of the Celestial Dawn was digging through centuries of ice. Dr. Amy Winters was the first to see the entrance, a massive doorway carved into the side of a frozen mountain. The symbols around it glowed faintly blue, as if responding to their presence. Amy reached out to touch one and felt warmth radiating from stone that should have been frozen solid for thousands of years. Kate made the decision to go inside. Despite Beth protesting about unknown dangers, they had come too far to turn back. Now the team activated their helmet lights and stepped through the entrance into darkness. The corridor beyond stretched deeper than their lights could reach, carved from a single piece of obsidian that reflected their faces back at them like ghosts. The walls were covered in writing beautiful flowing script that seemed to move when Amy looked at it. Directly, she took photos with her scanner trying to capture the strange glyphs for later study. Kate led them forward, her hand resting on the plasma pistol at her hip. Beth followed close behind, checking every shadow for threats. After walking for what felt like hours, they emerged into a chamber so vast their lights could not reach the ceiling. The floor was made of crystal clear as glass, and beneath it Amy could see stars. She realized with shock that they were looking through the planet itself at the galaxy. Beyond this place had been built by people who understood reality in ways humanity could only dream of. In the center of the chamber stood the statue. It was taller than any human carved from white crystal that seemed to glow with inner light. The figure was a woman frozen in mid-dance, one hand reaching upward, the other extended toward the entrance as if inviting visitors closer. Her features were sharp and elegant with high cheekbones and pointed ears that swept back from her head like wings. Her eyes were closed, but Amy felt certain that if they opened, they would be beautiful and terrible. Kate walked around the statue, slowly taking it all in. The woman wore armor that looked both ancient and advanced, at the same time flowing plates that seemed to grow from her body rather than being worn over it. In one hand, she held what might have been a sword, though its blade was made of frozen light rather than metal. Beth was reading the walls, her translator struggling with the ancient language. She called out her findings as she worked the words speaking of a sleeping guardian and a war that consumed stars, whole galaxies burning in the fires of some ancient conflict. Amy moved closer to the statue, drawn by curiosity that overrode her usual caution. The woman was so lifelike that Amy expected her to breathe. She could see individual strands of hair carved with impossible precision, each finger perfectly formed down to the smallest detail. Whoever had made this statue had loved the subject deeply. That much was clear. Amy reached out before she could stop herself. Her fingers touched the statue's outstretched hand. The chamber exploded with light, blinding white brilliance that sent Kate and Beth stumbling backward, shielding their eyes. Amy tried to pull her hand away but found it stuck to the crystal as if frozen. Their warmth spread up her arm. Not painful, but overwhelming, like standing too close to a fire. The glyphs on the walls blazed to life, turning from blue to gold to red, cycling through colors that hurt to look at. Directly the crystal floor beneath them cracked with sounds like thunder, and from somewhere far below came a roar that shook the entire mountain. Beth grabbed Kate, pulling her toward the exit, but Kate refused to leave Amy behind. The light faded, slowly revealing something impossible. the statue was moving. Its chest rose and fell with breath, its fingers twitched where they touched Amy's hand, and then its eyes opened, glowing with amber light, bright as stars. The woman looked directly at Amy and spoke in a voice that sounded like wind through crystal bells. The words were in perfect English, which should have been impossible. The woman said that the Void King awakens and that Amy had freed her too late. She called Amy Child of Earth, and there was such sorrow in her voice that Amy felt tears on her cheeks, though she did not know why she was crying. The crystal that had formed the statue began to crack. Spreading out from where their hands touched, pieces fell away like ice melting in spring, revealing pale skin beneath marked with glowing symbols that moved across her body like living things. The woman stepped down from her pedestal, moving with fluid grace despite having been frozen for who knew how long. Kate found her voice and demanded to know who this woman was. The woman introduced herself as Princess Elindra of House Starweaver, last of the Luminary Empire and guardian of secrets. Humanity was not ready to know. She pulled her hand away from Amy, who stumbled backward into Beth's arms. Elindra looked at the three humans with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. She asked how long she had slept. Kate told her the year as humans counted it. Elindra closed her eyes and whispered numbers in a language that made Amy's translator spark and fail, doing calculations that took several long moments. When she opened her eyes again, they were filled with despair. 990 years she had been in stasis. 990 years waiting for a threat to pass that should have taken only a century. Her people were gone. The empire was dust, and she had failed in her duty. Before anyone could respond, another sound echoed through the chamber that roared from below, but closer now and louder. The crystal floor cracked further, revealing darkness beneath, and from that darkness came heat intense enough that their environmental suits activated cooling systems automatically. Elindra turned toward the sound, and her expression changed from sorrow to something more complex. Fear and love mixed together. She whispered a name, Vorthrax. She said he was awake and that they had to run, but it was already too late. The floor shattered completely, and something massive burst upward through the opening. A creature of scales and fire, with eyes that burned with corrupted intelligence. Amy saw the dragon and understood that their expedition to a dead world had just awakened something that should have stayed buried forever. The creature opened its mouth and roared, and in that sound was rage that had been building for nearly 1,000 years. Kate grabbed Amy and Beth, pushing them toward the exit, but Elindra stood her ground, facing the dragon alone. She raised one hand and spoke words that made the air shimmer with power, trying to reach through the corruption to the being she had once loved. The dragon struck, and the chamber filled with fire. The fire washed over them but never touched their skin. Elindra had thrown up a shield of shimmering energy that turned the flames aside like water flowing around a rock. Kate felt the heat through her suit, but nothing more. She watched in amazement as the princess stood between them and the dragon, her hands moving in patterns that left trails of light in the air. The dragon was massive beyond comprehension. Scales black as night, but shot through with veins of purple that pulsed with sickly light. Its eyes were the worst part, intelligent and aware, but twisted by something that made them glow with madness. It knew them, it understood them, and it hated. With an intensity that was almost physical, Elindra was speaking in that language that hurt to hear her voice, pleading, then commanding, then breaking with emotion. Amy realized she was watching someone try to reach a loved one who no longer recognized her. The dragon, whose name was Vorthrax, the eternal flame, responded with more fire and rage. Beth pulled at Kate, urging her to run while they had the chance, but Kate was transfixed by what she was seeing. This was first contact, but not like anything humanity had prepared for. This was history and tragedy playing out in front of them, and she could not look away. The dragon's tail swept across the chamber, smashing into pillars that had stood for millennia. Crystal shattered and rained down like deadly hail. The shield protected them, but Elindra was weakening. Amy could see it in how she swayed on her feet, how the shield flickered and dimmed. Kate made a decision. She pulled her plasma pistol and fired at the dragon. Knowing it was useless but needing to do something, the bolt struck scales and dissipated harmlessly, but it got the dragon's attention. Vorthrax turned those terrible eyes on her, and she saw her death reflected in them. Then something changed. For just a moment, the purple glow faded from the dragon's eyes, and they became clear gold, beautiful, and sad. The creature froze mid-attack, staring at Kate and the other humans as if seeing them for the first time. Elindra gasped and called out to him again, using what must have been his true name. The moment passed and the madness returned, but it had been enough. Elindra knew he was still in there somewhere, buried under corruption and pain. She turned to the humans and shouted at them to run, told them the temple was collapsing, and they had seconds to reach their ship. Kate grabbed Amy and they ran. Beth led the way, retracing their steps through the corridors that were now crumbling around them behind them. They could hear the dragon roaring and Elindra crying out in that ancient language, trying to calm him, trying to bring him back from whatever darkness held him. They burst out onto the frozen surface just as the mountain began to collapse. Inward, the celestial dawn was where they had left it. Emergency engines already warming up as the ship's computer detected seismic activity. Kate practically threw Amy up the boarding ramp with Beth right behind her. She was about to follow when she saw Elindra emerge from the entrance. The princess was carrying something glowing in her arms. At first, Kate thought it was a weapon, but then she realized it was a piece of crystal from the statue containing some kind of energy. She stumbled and fell to her knees in the ice. Obviously exhausted, Kate ran back against every survival instinct she had and helped Elindra to her feet. Together they made it to the ship as the mountain came down behind them, tons of ice and rock, burying the temple forever. Beth sealed the hatch, and the celestial dawn lifted off, barely clearing the expanding cloud of debris. Kate got Elindra to the medical bay and watched as Amy began scanning her with every instrument they had. The princess was not human. That much was obvious, but she was close enough that their equipment could read her vital signs. Her heart beat slower than a human's, and her body temperature was lower, but she was alive and breathing. Elindra opened her eyes and looked at Kate with an expression of infinite weariness. She thanked Kate for helping her, said that humans were either very brave or very foolish. Kate replied that humanity was usually both. Elindra laughed, and it was the saddest sound Kate had ever heard over the next few hours as the ship put distance between them and Valoria Prime. Elindra told them her story. Amy recorded everything, while Beth kept watch and Kate listened. The Luminary Empire had spanned 3 galaxies once. A civilization of magic and technology blended so perfectly that one could not be separated from the other. They had lived in peace for 50,000 years until Kaltharon came. He had been a prince of the royal family, Elindra's own brother, brilliant and ambitious. He had discovered something in the spaces between dimensions, a power source that could fuel spells beyond imagining. He called it the Void, and he became obsessed with it. The Void changed him, twisted his mind and body until he was no longer Luminari. He became the Void King, and he declared war on all organic life, believing that consciousness itself was a disease that needed to be purged from the universe. The war that followed consumed everything. Worlds burned, suns were extinguished, entire species were harvested, their life energy converted into fuel for the Void, King's ever-growing army. The Luminari fought back, but they were losing badly. Elindra had been a warrior princess bonded to Vorthrax since childhood. Together they had led the final desperate assault on the Void King's fortress. It had been a trap. They walked into it knowing they had no choice, and in the battle that followed, Vorthrax had been hit by a corruption weapon. The dragon had absorbed void energy directly into his being to protect Alindra. Taking the blast meant for her it should have killed him instantly. But Vorthrax was too strong to die. Instead, he began to change the corruption spreading through him, turning his own power against him. In those final moments of clarity before the madness took hold, Vorthrax had done something impossible. He had channeled all his remaining pure energy into helping Alindra seal the Void King away in a pocket dimension, a prison that should have held for all eternity, but it had cost everything. The Luminari Council had decided that both Alindra and Vorthrax were too dangerous to be allowed to remain active. She carried the knowledge of how to seal the Void King, and he carried the corruption in his blood. They were placed in temporal stasis in that temple on that dead world to sleep until the Void King's prison failed. 990 years they had waited, and now they were awake, which could only mean one thing: the prison had failed. Caltheron was free. Kate felt her blood run cold. She asked what this Void King would do now. Where would he go? Alindra's answer was worse than Kate could have imagined. The Void King would come for Earth. He would come because 990 years ago, Alindra had hidden something on that primitive world. Something called the Cosmic Keystone, an artifact that could break the barriers between dimensions permanently. If Caltheron obtained it, he could merge all realities into a void realm under his control. Kate asked why Earth of all places. Alindra explained that her people had visited Earth in ancient times, before humans had even developed writing. They had hidden the keystone there because Caltheron would never think to look among such primitive beings. It had seemed like the perfect hiding place. Amy was working frantically at her console, running scans of the crystal Alindra had brought from the temple. She called Kate over and showed her what she had found. The crystal contained quantum data compressed beyond anything human technology could achieve. It was a complete copy of Alindra's memories and knowledge. Beth reported from the cockpit that something was happening. Long-range sensors were picking up anomalies, massive energy signatures appearing at the edge of known spaceships, thousands of them moving in formation toward human territory. Kate ordered the ship to maximum speed toward the nearest human outpost. They had to warn everyone they had to prepare. Alindra stood with difficulty and walked to the viewing port. She looked out at the stars with eyes that had seen them burn. She said that humanity had days at most before the Scourge fleet arrived, and that she was sorry. So very sorry for bringing this doom to their doorstep. Kate stood beside her and said that humanity had faced extinction before, and survived. They would find a way to survive this too. Alindra looked at this young human commander and saw something in her that reminded her of warriors she had known. Millennia ago, courage in the face of hopelessness, she placed a hand on Kate's shoulder and made a promise she would teach humanity everything she knew about fighting the void, even if it killed her. Behind them, the crystal pulsed with light, and deep in the ship's cargo bay something stirred. The corruption that had been sleeping in Vorthrax's blood was waking up, and it sensed its master calling from across the stars. The war for Earth's survival had begun. The celestial dawn reached Nova Terra after 3 days of faster-than-light travel that pushed the ship's engines to their limits. Kate had sent emergency transmissions ahead, warning of the threat, but she knew how her message would be received, with skepticism and demands for proof. Humanity had never encountered hostile aliens before, and now she was claiming an ancient empire was coming to harvest. Earth Admiral Lisa Chen met them at the landing bay with a full security detail. Kate saw the weapons and understood the Admiral's caution. She would have done the same thing. Alindra stepped off the ship with dignity, despite her obvious exhaustion, and the guards immediately raised their rifles. Lisa ordered them to stand down. After a long, tense moment, she looked at Alindra with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, asking Kate if this was really an alien princess who had been asleep for nearly 1,000 years. Kate confirmed it was, and that they had bigger problems than whether or not to believe an impossible story. The council chamber was filled with human military leadership. General Kyle Foster, commander of ground forces, was there, along with Dr. Claire Martinez, the head of exotic energy research, and a dozen other important people who all stared at Elindra like she was something from a nightmare or a dream. Elindra stood before them and told her story again, with Amy providing translations of the ancient records they had recovered from the temple. Claire was particularly interested in the energy readings, comparing them to theoretical models humanity had developed. Elindra watched the human scientist work and said something that surprised everyone. She said humans were remarkable that they had achieved in 2 centuries what had taken the Luminari 20,000 years to discover. Humanity had developed quantum physics and faster than light travel, independently reinventing concepts that ancient civilizations had needed magic to understand. General Kyle was less impressed. He wanted to know what weapons the Luminari had, what defenses, what tactics humanity could use. Elindra told him the truth, that conventional weapons were useless against void magic. The Scourge fleet had shields that existed partially in other dimensions. Bullets and missiles would pass through without touching them. Kyle asked what could hurt them. Then magic, Elindra said, and technology combined together in ways that neither humans nor Luminari had attempted. Before she said that human engineering combined with Luminari magical theory could create hybrid weapons that operated on multiple layers of reality. Lisa asked how long it would take to develop such weapons. Elindra answered honestly that even with her knowledge and human ingenuity, they had weeks at best to prepare for a war that could last years. They did not have time to do this properly, which meant they would have to take risks. Claire suggested they start with volunteers, humans who were willing to undergo the process of learning to channel magical energy. Elindra warned that it was dangerous. Human bodies were not naturally capable of containing the energies involved. Some would die in the attempt, others would be changed in ways they could not predict. Kate volunteered immediately. Beth tried to argue, but Kate cut her off, saying she had touched the statue first. She had woken Elindra, which made this her responsibility. Beth finally agreed, but insisted on being second. Amy volunteered as well, saying her exposure to the crystal had already changed something in her. She could feel energy moving through her body in ways that had not been there before. Over the next week, Elindra began training the first group of human volunteers. There were 30 of them at the start, soldiers and scientists who were willing to risk everything. Kate learned that magic was not about mystical words or dramatic gestures. It was about understanding reality at its deepest level and convincing it to behave differently. The first day, 3 volunteers dyed their bodies, unable to handle the energies Elindra was teaching them to channel. Kate watched them burn from the inside out and wondered if she would be next, but she kept going, driven by the knowledge that billions of lives depended on them learning this. Amy proved to be naturally gifted at channeling energy. Her neural patterns were almost perfectly compatible with luminary techniques. Elindra said she had never seen a human adapt so quickly. Claire worked with Amy to document everything, trying to understand the science behind what looked like magic. Beth struggled more than the others. Her mind worked differently, logical and structured in ways that made the fluid nature of magic difficult for her to grasp. Elindra told her that not everyone could be a warrior in the same way, but that did not make her less valuable. Then came the breakthrough. Claire and Amy, working together, discovered that human quantum computers could be programmed to amplify and stabilize magical energies. It was the combination Elindra had spoken of, technology doing what biology could not. They built the first hybrid weapon, a rifle that fired bolts of compressed reality that could pierce dimensional shields. The prototype worked but barely, and it drained the user's life force with every shot they needed. A better power source. Something that could sustain high-level magic without burning out. Claire suggested using the ship's fusion reactors, but Elindra said they needed something more, something alive. She meant Vorthrax. The dragon had been kept in a reinforced containment field in the lowest level of the military complex. His corruption was spreading even in stasis, the void energy leaking out and affecting the equipment around him. Kate visited him daily, watching through shielded glass as the magnificent creature twitched in troubled sleep. Elindra explained that Vorthrak's bond with her was still active, even corrupted, even mad. He would respond to her on some level if they could channel his power, if they could use his connection to both pure magic and void corruption. They could create weapons that operated on every layer of reality. Simultaneously, Beth asked what it would cost him. Elindra admitted she did not know that linking a human consciousness to Vorthrak's might stabilize him, or it might corrupt the human as well. It was a terrible risk, but they had no other options. Beth volunteered immediately. Kate tried to argue, but Beth was firm. She said that someone had to do it, and she was the logical choice. Her mind was already wired for complex systems. Thinking linking to a dragon's consciousness was just another network to understand, Kate wanted to forbid it, but she had no authority. Beth was a volunteer, and this was her choice. The ritual took place in the containment chamber, with Elindra guiding Beth through the mental exercises required to open her consciousness to another being. Kate and Amy watched from behind shields as Beth placed her hands on Vorthrak's scales and began to chant in the ancient language. At first nothing happened. Then, Beth's eyes began to glow with the same purple light that infected the dragon. She screamed, but did not pull away. Kate moved to intervene, but Elindra held her back, saying that interrupting now would kill them both. The light grew brighter and brighter until it was impossible to look at directly. Then suddenly, it was gone. Beth collapsed to the floor, breathing hard, her eyes flickering between human brown and dragon gold. Vorthrax opened his eyes, and for the first time since waking, they were clear. Beth stood up shakily, and Kate saw that she was changed. She moved differently, more fluid and powerful. Her voice when she spoke had an echo to it, as if two beings were speaking in unison. She said that Vorthrax was there with her, that they were sharing the same mind space. She also said that Kaltheron was much closer than they had thought. The Scourge fleet had already taken 3 human colony worlds and was moving toward Earth at speeds that should have been impossible. Admiral Lisa made the call to evacuate. Earth General Kyle wanted to fight to defend humanity homeworld, but Lisa overruled him, saying that symbolism meant nothing. If everyone was dead, they would evacuate as many people as possible and prepare to make their stand at New Vancouver, a heavily fortified colony world that gave them better defensive positions. Kate was put in command of the hybrid forces. The 30 volunteers who had survived training were now humanity, first magic-enhanced warriors. Elindra gave Kate armor that had belonged to one of her own warriors 900 years ago. It fit perfectly, adjusting to Kate's body and filling her with strength. Amy took command of the Starlight Requiem, one of 3 Luminari warships that had been hidden in the temple complex. The ship responded to her neural patterns like it had been waiting for her. Elindra said that Amy must have luminary blood somewhere in her ancestry. However distant Beth and Vorthrax prepared for aerial combat, the dragon could fly through space itself using magic to create pockets of breathable atmosphere around him. Beth could guide him, control his power in ways he could not do alone while corrupted. Together, they were a weapon unlike anything humanity had ever fielded. The evacuation of Earth took 2 weeks. Billions of people loaded onto colony ships and sent to distant safe zones. Kate walked the empty streets of cities that had stood for centuries, knowing they might never be inhabited again. She found a child toy dropped in the rush and picked it up, promising herself that they would win, that children would play on Earth again. The Scourge fleet arrived at New Vancouver right on schedule. Thousands of dark ships that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. They were beautiful in a terrible way, designed by minds that no longer valued life, only efficiency. Kate stood on the command deck of the human flagship, wearing her enchanted armor and holding a hybrid weapon ready for her first taste of war against an enemy that had destroyed galaxies. Beside her, Elindra looked out at the approaching fleet, and Kate saw tears on her cheeks. The princess was remembering another battle, another last stand that had cost her everything. This time, Kate thought they would write a different ending. The first attack came without warning. Scourge ships materialized from jump space directly above New Vancouver. Orbital defenses opened fire immediately, but the weapons passed through shields that existed partially in other dimensions. Kate watched in horror as conventional missiles simply ceased to exist the moment they touched the dark hulls. Admiral Lisa gave the order for hybrid forces to engage. Kate led her team of 30 enhanced warriors in dropships that fell toward the planet's surface like meteors. New Vancouver had 4 million people living on it, and they would defend every single one. The Scourge landed ground troops, and Kate got her first look at void wraiths up close. They had been people once, but corruption had transformed them into shadows wearing armor. Their faces were visible through their helmets, twisted in eternal screams as if some part of them was still aware and suffering. Kate fired her hybrid weapon and watched with satisfaction as the reality bolt punched through a wraith's dimensional shields and destroyed it completely, but for everyone she killed, 3 more. The Scourge seemed to have infinite numbers, and her team was already exhausted from channeling the energy needed to power their weapons. Amy brought the Starlight Requiem into low orbit and began firing on the Scourge capital ships. The ancient Luminari vessel outmatched anything humanity had built. Its weapons carved through the enemy fleet like they were made of paper, but there were so many, even Amy could not stop them all. Beth and Vorthrax were a streak of black fire across the battlefield. The dragon moved between ships too fast for enemy weapons to track him. His breath weapon was cosmic fire that burned on every layer of reality. Simultaneously, ships died by the dozen under his assault, but Kate could see that Beth was struggling. The corruption was fighting back, trying to overwhelm her consciousness. On the ground, the battle became desperate. Scourge forces reached the city proper, and civilians who had not evacuated in time were caught in the fighting. Kate saw a wraith grab a child and begin the harvesting process, pulling the life energy directly from the screaming victim. She ran faster than she had ever moved, the enchanted armor amplifying her strength and speed. She killed the wraith, but it was too late. The child was already gone, drained to nothing but a dried husk. Kate had seen death before, but never anything like this. Never something so casual and cruel. She felt rage building in her chest, hot and terrible, and she channeled it into her weapon. Her squad was down to 23 members. The others had fallen to wraith weapons or simply burned out from using too much magic. Too quickly, Kate wanted to mourn them. But there was no time. The Scourge were pushing deeper into the city, and if they broke through to the fusion reactors, New Vancouver would become a crater. Elindra was fighting alongside human soldiers, her magic far more powerful than anything the enhanced warriors could manage. She moved like water through the enemy ranks, her sword cutting through armor and flesh with equal ease. Kate watched her and understood why the Luminari had once ruled galaxies. Then the Scourge brought out their planet Cracker. It was a weapon Kate had only heard about in Elindra's briefings, a device that could destabilize a world's core and crack it open like an egg. Admiral Lisa ordered all ships to target the planet Cracker immediately, but Scourge shields protected it, and it was charging for its devastating shot. Amy made a choice that Kate would remember forever. She turned the Starlight Requiem directly toward the planet Cracker and pushed the engines past their safety limits. The ship accelerated to speeds that should have torn it apart. Amy used every bit of magic she had learned to hold the vessel together, even as it began to burn. The Requiem struck the planet Cracker at near light speed. The explosion was visible from orbit, a flash of white light that briefly outshone the system's sun. Kate felt the shock wave even from kilometers away, and when her vision cleared, the planet Cracker was gone, just debris spreading across space, but so was the Starlight Requiem. Kate screamed Amy's name into the comm, demanding a response, but got only static. Elindra reached out with her magic, trying to sense if Amy had survived what she found, made her gasp in surprise Amy was alive, but changed. The explosion had transformed her into something new, her body destroyed. But her consciousness remained as pure energy. She existed now across multiple dimensions, simultaneously able to see and affect reality in ways that even Elindra could not. Amy spoke directly into their minds, her voice strange and echoing, saying she was okay, that she could still fight. Kate wanted to cry, but settled for laughing in relief. The battle turned after that. With the planet Cracker gone, the Scourge lost their ability to threaten the entire planet. They began a fighting retreat back to their ships. Kate pressed the attack, not giving them time to regroup her remaining warriors, fighting with desperate fury. Beth and Vorthrax drove off 3 Scourge capital ships, the dragon roaring defiance as his fire consumed them. But Kate could see that Vorthrax was changing, the void corruption spreading faster now, purple veins running across his scales, his eyes flickering between clarity and madness. A voice boomed across the battlefield, speaking in a language that made reality ripple. It was Kal Thuron himself, projecting from somewhere far away. He praised the humans for their courage, said they had fought well for such young species, and then he made them an offer. Surrender Earth and the cosmic keystone peacefully, and he would spare the rest of humanity's colonies refuse, and he would harvest every world humanity had touched, over 3 billion souls, converted to void energy to fuel his ascension. Admiral Lisa's response was immediate and unprintable. Kate loved her for it. Kal Thuron laughed, and the sound was full of genuine amusement. He said he had expected no less, that humanity reminded him of the Luminari in their youth. Proud and fierce and doomed, he said he would come to Earth personally to claim what was his, and that no force in this galaxy could stop him. The communication ended, and the remaining Scourge forces jumped away, leaving New Vancouver battered but intact. Kate surveyed the damage with a sick feeling in her stomach. They had won, but barely, and at terrible cost. Over 1,000 soldiers dead, including 7 of her enhanced warriors. The city was in ruins, and millions of civilians had witnessed horrors they would never forget. But they had stopped the Scourge. They had proven that humanity could fight back, that the hybrid weapons worked, that courage and sacrifice could make a difference. Kate gathered her surviving team and Elindra for a debrief. Amy was there too, her energy form hovering in the air, manifesting as a figure of golden light. She said she could sense the Scourge fleet regrouping, could feel Kal Thuron preparing for his assault on Earth. Elindra spoke of what they had learned from the battle, that Kal Thuron had grown stronger during his imprisonment, feeding on the void energy of his prison, that he was no longer just a corrupted luminary prince, but something far worse, a being of pure void that existed partially outside reality itself. Beth reported that Vorthrax's consciousness was slipping, that the corruption was winning their battle, and that soon she would not be able to hold him. Kate asked how long. Beth estimated days, maybe hours. They needed a plan. Kate proposed using the keystone as bait, drawing Kal Thuron to Earth and then trapping him there. Elindra said it could work, but retrieving the keystone from Earth's core would require immense power and would likely trigger global earthquakes that could kill millions. Claire suggested an alternative. She and Amy had been working on a theory about combining human quantum technology with luminary magic to create a reality anchor, a device that could sever Kal Thuron's connection to the void. Without it, he would be vulnerable, mortal again. But building the anchor would require someone to channel massive amounts of energy, both magical and technological, simultaneously, likely fatal to whoever attempted it. Kate looked around at her team, at these people who had already sacrificed so much, and asked who among them was willing to die for Earth. Every hand went up. Kate felt pride and sorrow in equal measure. She said they would return to Earth and make their stand there on humanity's homeworld. They would retrieve the keystone, build the anchor, and end this war, one way or another. Elindra warned that even if they succeeded, even if they defeated Caltheron, the cost would be enormous. Kate answered that some things were worth any cost, that Earth was not just a planet, it was home, and home was worth dying for. The survivors of New Vancouver boarded their ships and began the journey back to Earth. Behind them, the colony world burned, but its people lived, and that was victory enough for now. Beth stood at a viewport with Vorthrak's consciousness beside her. In her mind, the dragon was showing her memories of the first war of battles that had raged for centuries, of entire species choosing extinction over corruption. She saw Elindra as she had been then, young and fierce, riding Vorthrax into combat against impossible odds. Vorthrax sent her one clear thought through the madness. Thank you for giving him the chance to fight one last time, to die protecting something rather than as a corrupted monster. Beth promised him that when the end came, it would be glorious. Earth hung in space like a blue jewel against the darkness, and Kate thought it had never looked more beautiful or more vulnerable. The evacuation was still ongoing, millions of ships lifting from the surface, carrying as many people as possible to safe zones beyond the solar system. But there would not be enough time. Everyone knew it. The Scourge fleet arrived 3 days later. They came from every direction simultaneously, thousands of dark ships converging on Earth like a closing fist. Caltheran flagship was at the center, larger than anything humanity had ever built, a structure of twisted metal and void energy that seemed to devour light itself. Kate stood in the command center, wearing her enchanted armor and carrying weapons she had learned to use through blood and pain. Her team was with her, the 20 survivors of New Vancouver, who had earned the right to be called warriors. Elindra was there too, preparing for a battle she had fought once before and lost. Amy manifested beside them, her energy form pulsing with power. She had spent the journey back to Earth preparing the reality anchor device with Claire. Help, it was built. It was ready. All they needed was someone to channel the energy through it. Beth and Vorthrax were in orbit, already waiting for the signal to begin. The final assault, the dragon was barely holding on to sanity, his scales now more purple than black, his eyes burning with void corruption. But Beth consciousness was there inside him, holding him together through sheer force of will. Elindra had spent the last 3 days teaching Kate something she had never shared with anyone before: the true name of Caltheron, the name he had been given at birth before the void twisted him. Speaking it would weaken him, temporarily break his connection to the void for just a few seconds, but it would cost the speaker their voice permanently. Kate had accepted without hesitation. What was a voice compared to a world? The battle began as the Scourge fleet entered weapons range. Human and Luminari ships engaged immediately, hybrid weapons tearing through void shields and destroying enemy vessels. But there were too many, always too many, for every ship destroyed. 3 more took its place. Kate led ground forces at the excavation site where they were digging down toward the keystone. Elindra had pinpointed its location deep in Earth's mantle, where it had rested for nearly 1,000 years. They had to retrieve it before Caltheron. Did Scourge drop pods rained from the sky, disgorging wraiths by the thousands. Kate and her warriors met them with fire and fury hybrid weapons, carving through the enemy ranks. Magic and technology working together as Elindra had promised they would. The humans fought with desperate courage, knowing that every second they bought allowed more civilians to escape. Amy appeared on the battlefield as a being of light, her energy form manifesting weapons that existed across multiple dimensions. She fought like nothing Kate had ever seen, reality itself bending to her will wraiths, simply ceasing to exist as she erased them from multiple planes simultaneously. But even Amy power was not unlimited. Kate could see her form flickering, weakening as she expended energy. Alindra went deeper into the excavation shaft, descending toward the keystone, while Kate held the surface. She moved through tunnels that had been carved by her own people's machines so long ago, following the pull of the artifact she had hidden to protect the universe. She found it in a chamber of crystal. The keystone, hovering in midair, pulsing with soft blue light. It was smaller than she remembered, no larger than a human's fist, but it contained power enough to reshape reality. She reached for it and felt memories flooding back. The day she had placed it here on this primitive world, among people who did not yet know that other species existed. She had been so young then, so certain, that hiding it here would keep it safe. She had been wrong. Caltheron appeared before her not physically, but as a projection of void energy. His form was terrible to look at, no longer humanoid, but something that hurt the eye, a being of pure corruption, wearing the shape of the prince he had once been. He spoke to her, and his voice was almost gentle little sister. He called her using the name only family could use. He said he had missed her, that the void was lonely, without someone who remembered what he had been before Alindra raised her sword and told him that the brother she had known was dead, that Caltheron had died the day he touched the void. This thing wearing his face was just a monster. He laughed and said that she was right, that Caltheron was gone. But that did not make what he had become wrong. The void had shown him truth that organic life was chaos and suffering, and that only through void energy could the universe achieve perfect order. He was not a monster, he was a savior. Alindra asked him about the billions he had harvested, the civilizations he had destroyed, the people he had corrupted into wraiths. How was that salvation? Caltheron replied that they had been freed from the burden of existence, that their energy now served a higher purpose. He reached for the keystone, and Alindra realized that his projection was becoming more solid. He was pushing through from whatever dimension he occupied, forcing himself into normal space. She grabbed the keystone first and ran. On the surface, Kate saw Alindra burst from the excavation shaft with the artifact blazing in her hands, and behind her came something that made Kate's blood freeze. Caltheron in all his terrible glory stepping into reality for the first time in 990 years, he was massive, towering over the battlefield, his form constantly shifting between solid matter and void energy. His eyes were empty, voids that seemed to go on forever. And when he spoke, the ground shook. He demanded the keystone, told Alindra to surrender it peacefully, and spare these humans the suffering of harvesting. Kate stepped forward, positioning herself between Caltheron and Alindra. She looked up at this being that had destroyed galaxies, and she felt fear like she had never known, but she also felt courage. Humanity had not come this far to surrender. Now she opened her mouth and spoke the true name. The effect was immediate. Caltheron screamed as his void connection severed his form, destabilizing, becoming almost solid. Kate felt her voice die mid-word, felt her vocal cords burn away with the power of the name. But it had worked. Alindra threw the keystone to Amy, who caught it in her energy form and raced toward the reality anchor device. Claire was there, waiting to activate it. The machine roared to life-pulling power from Earth's magnetic field and from the keystone itself, creating a bubble of stabilized reality around them. Amy began channeling energy through the anchor, and Kate saw her friend scream silently as massive amounts of power flowed through her energy form. She was burning herself out, using her very existence as a conduit. Beth and Vorthrax dove from orbit straight at Caltheron, the dragon roaring with one final moment of clarity before the corruption took him completely. They struck the Void King with all their combined power, and the impact created a shockwave that flattened everything for kilometers. Kate was thrown backward, her armor saving her life, but barely. When she struggled to her feet, she saw Beth and Vorthrax tangled with Caltheron in close combat. Beth was pulling void energy into herself, into Vorthrax, using their shared corruption to absorb Caltheron power. Kate understood what Beth was doing. She was making herself a prison trapping. Caltheron consciousness inside the dragon's corrupted form, creating an eternal battle within a single being. Caltheron realized too late what was happening. He tried to pull away, but Beth held on with iron will, even as the void consumed her, even as she felt her humanity burning away. She held on and pulled him in. The reality anchor reached full power, and Amy released all the energy at once. The explosion of light erased the Scourge fleet from orbit, erased the Wraiths from the battlefield, erased everything touched by void corruption, except for Beth and Vorthrax, who had absorbed Caltheron and now contained him. When the light faded, Amy was gone, her energy form dispersed across dimensions. She existed still, but no longer. In any one place, she had become something new, a guardian entity watching over reality from outside it. Kate tried to call out to her friends, but no sound came from her ruined throat. She had given her voice for this victory, and she would never speak again. Beth and Vorthrax stood in the center of a crater. Their forms merged now into something neither dragon nor human. Their eyes glowed with constant battle between purple corruption and gold clarity. They spoke with Beth's voice, but distorted, saying that they would leave, that they could not stay near people while containing Caltheron. They would fly into the deep dark between galaxies, and there they would fight forever, keeping the Void King imprisoned within themselves, an eternal sacrifice. Kate wanted to scream, wanted to beg them to stay, but she could only watch as her friend spread dragon wings and launched into space, becoming a distant star, and then nothing. Elindra knelt beside Kate and held her as she wept voiceless tears for friends who had sacrificed everything. The war was over. Humanity had won, but the cost had been almost more than Kate could bear. 5 years passed. Earth healed slowly, the scars of battle fading as nature reclaimed devastated areas. Humanity rebuilt, working alongside Luminari refugees who had heard of Elindra awakening and come to join her construction of a new hybrid civilization. Kate became admiral of the combined fleet, unable to speak, but communicating through sign language and magical projection that Elindra taught her. She led with wisdom, earned through sacrifice, and her crews loved her for it. Claire and other scientists continued developing hybrid technology, making discoveries that advanced humanity by centuries. They built ships that could travel between dimensions, weapons that operated on multiple layers of reality defenses that would ensure no void fleet could threaten them again. Elindra found peace training new generations of warriors, human and Luminari, learning from each other. She watched with pride as the hybrid civilization grew into something neither species could have built alone. Amy appeared sometimes as a manifestation of golden light, never staying long but always watching over them. She had transcended physical form, but had not abandoned her friends. And far away in the darkness between galaxies, Beth and Vorthrax fought their eternal battle, keeping Caltheron imprisoned within their shared consciousness. Sometimes their light could be seen by deep space observers, a purple and gold star that flickered constantly as the battle raged. Kate visited Amy's memorial every year on the anniversary of the final battle. Humanity had built monuments to honor all who had sacrificed, monuments bearing the names of warriors who had given everything. She stood before the statue they had made of Amy, showing her in her energy form, and placed flowers at its base. Elindra stood beside her as she always did, and together they remembered. A signal arrived from deep space that day. Ancient Luminari code coming from a distant galaxy, other survivors of the Empire calling out, hoping someone would answer. Kate looked at Elindra and saw hope in the ancient princess' eyes. The story was not over. New stars appeared on navigation charts, new destinations for a hybrid civilization ready to explore the universe, and Kate knew that Amy and Beth and all who had sacrificed would have wanted them to continue forward. She signed orders to prepare for a journey to the stars. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and humanity had proven it belonged among them.